You're not meant to clap because we are here tonight to discuss the economic survey. Now, this is the time of the year that I learn more about the economy than at any other time by all the other intellectuals in this country. And I must say, I said wonderful things about what your survey last year, and your team, and all of them are here, or many of them are here. You've really outdone. This is absolutely exceptional, the amount of research. When I did the economic survey before you were born, if the improvement in India had been as good as the improvement from my survey to these, we'd be a developed country, I think. But congratulations, it really is exceptional, and it's very different actually from last year because you've covered unusual areas and you've brought one or two really very big ideas, but more than that, the breadth of it and the depth of research is unusual.
Yeah, I think that we raised the ambition this year, even relative to last year, and we have a wonderful team in the economic division and in the office of CEA.
Why don't the team just stand up for a second?
Please. And I just want to say that many of them are here, but last year.
Great, well done. God bless you.
Last year, I said in the survey, it's the ideas for India and for bettering India that matter, not their provenance or paternity. So really this time we have all these people, but also scores of people from all over the world who've also contributed to this. So I want to acknowledge their contribution as well.
Right.
There's even a contribution by the Finance Minister, by the way. First time, probably.
Really? You actually got hands-on onto it, really?
There's a section. I'll ask you to figure it out.
Okay, done. We'll figure it out. I think most of us here have read it, although obviously not in detail, but there's so much. So shall we just get right down to it?
Please.
One of the things that struck me in this survey is that it's kind of balanced. It's not rah-rah. It's not that we're in terrible shape. It's kind of sober, and particularly on demonetization. To be honest, you don't say this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to India, and you also don't say it's a terrible thing, which is the norm in India. We have this. You call it a precocious cleavage, which your turn of phrase, but used for something else. But even here, so let's have a look at what the survey says on demonetization. First of all, it talks about actually how demonetization in a country like India could have a huge impact because we're a very high cash economy. 68% of consumer transactions are in cash. That's in value terms. It's actually about more than 90% in volume terms. Now compare that with China, where it's 45. That's a huge difference. And United States, cash, only 14%. It's a hugely digital economy. So 68%, and you try to demonetize, it is going to hurt a bit. Now let's have a look at the impact of demonetization. All of us, across the country, the general feeling was that demonetization has had a huge impact. Money has gone down to zero. There's no money available because 86% of the currency has been demonetized. But actually, according to the survey, if you look at the pre-demonetization level, it dropped 35% to 65% at its worst. That was about middle of December. And then the remonetization is going to happen by about May, when we go back to almost the same levels as pre-demonetization. So first of all, demonetization not as severe as people thought it was. There was quite a lot of hype, and remonetization will happen by May.
Well, I think first, the estimates that we put out, and my colleagues here can chip in as they whenever appropriate, that the headline number, remember that headline number is basically, people say, 86% went out of circulation.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So you think that's a huge drop. Right. But if you actually look at it more carefully, the drop is much less for a couple of reasons, right? One was that some of the demonetized notes were de facto used as legal tender as well. So that's an important reason why there's a difference. The second thing to note on the other side is that if you look at what the headline number is, people think that the worst of the crunch was in November. Actually, it was actually in December.
Yeah.
Because remember that in December is when all these old monetized notes went out of circulation, and then the new notes, the 2000, were not as liquid as the old notes that were demonetized. So that had a dampening effect as well. And then going forward now, we're remonetizing. And these are estimates, but I think that it's not that it's going to be May, but anytime over the next 2 to 3 months, we're pretty much close to what we estimate is the transactions demand for cash in the economy. So we're kind of well on our way to reaching that.
Today is the first time you've talked about demonetization. You have studied silence as Chief Economic Advisor. Why was that?
So, as I said, there's an old Buddhist saying, right? You speak only when you can improve upon the silence.
Okay.
Or in
but
the,
there was no
but,
silence, yeah.
Yeah, or in the case of India, when you improve upon, as I said, the noise, the cacophony, the clamor, So,
and you've got to do some research for that. India, we don't like to do too much research. Hard work.
Yeah.
So the impact eventually of demonetization that you studied and in a macro view was that it will drop our GDP growth rate by 0.25 to 0.5% compared to your base of 7%. Just let's get this graph clear. The Finance Ministry of the Chief Economic Adviser's Office had forecast a growth rate without demonetization. We can bring the graphic up of 7%. There it is. GDP forecast without demonetization.
By the way, that's also very close to the CSO's estimate.
It was 7.1.
Yeah, 7.1.
Yeah.
7.1. So
I mean, 0.1, that makes a huge, we've got such rigorous collection methods and models.
I think it's what Keynes would call spurious exactitude.
Exactly, and in India it's taken to an extreme.
Yeah.
So, okay, you improved on the CSO's estimate by 0.1. Wonderful. But with demonetization, you brought it down to 6.5 to 6.75. I don't even like that 0.75, 2 decimal places, but...
Yeah, that's why I said 3 1/4, 6.5 and 3/4.
3/4,
Yeah.
Okay. So, that's not so bad.
That reduction, by the way, is much less than what the IMF and the World Bank have forecast as a reduction. The IMF says
1%
growth
drop.
will come to 1, World Bank by about 0.6%. So this is lower than that.
But somehow they've also come back to your, because they were 7.6 without demonetization, now 6.6, which is about halfway through.
Exactly.
So you copied them, they copied you. No, we won't go into that.
Yeah, we won't go into that, yeah.
But one of the things I did notice that there is a bit of optimism in that 0.25 to 0.5% drop. And it's like if we do things properly, it's, cricket commentators often say, which I can't stand, and I'm a cricket fanatic, if the team bats well and bowls well, and if they feel well, we should have a good chance of winning. Good chance. So there are a few things about that we have to do many things to make demonetization not have a more negative impact, to make sure it does really have an impact on corruption. So it's a bit overly optimistic or deliberately optimistic on that?
I think that we need to distinguish the short-term costs from the long-term benefits,
Right.
potential long-term benefits.
Right.
I think these numbers relate much more to the short-term costs, right? And this is pretty much a function of how much cash went out and how much cash is going to come back in. So in that sense, I think that drives that. But I think it must be emphasized that, speaking to your point about 1/4 to 1/2 percentage point, is that number probably underestimates the impact, especially on those in the informal sector. Because the way we
Informal
measure...
sector,
yeah. So the impact on the economy as a whole, if you include the informal sector, will be a little bit more, because we don't really have a good handle on measuring the informal sector.
Yeah.
And
Put it mildly.
yeah, and ironically, I think, or strangely, we measure the informal sector through formal sector indicators, so which kind of compounds a problem.
Yes.
Anthony, do you want to speak to that? I mean, how we do it, for example?
Most of the service sector indicators used, one is service tax and the second is sales tax.
Right.
And much part of the economy will be out of these two tax nets, especially of service tax.
Right.
So these formal sector indicators, even at the best of times, will not capture the dynamics of the economy.
Right.
Perhaps.
So it's a rough estimate, and that's a worry. And
But now coming back to your other point about optimism, etc.
Right.
So those are the short-term costs. Then there are the potential long-term benefits, and here I think there's probably a little bit more uncertainty, and also all these things will get a time to play out. So as we say there, history's verdict will come down the line. But I think the important thing is that in this case, and not to be too evasive and things, as we say in the chapter, we lay down clear markers which can identify and monitor success going forward.
Right.
For example, more black money into the system. That means, can we get, we can fix the baseline today on how many taxpayers there are and reported tax income. Let's monitor that over time. 2, this was a tax on non-financial savings. Our cash to GDP was about 12.5%. Going forward, if it's worked, it should reduce the equilibrium cash to GDP ratio. Similarly, indirect taxpayers, if you think black money is made through not paying indirect taxes as well, the number of people who register should also go up. So in that way, there is a kind of clear way of identifying and saying, hey, we're not kind of fudging, these are the markers, let's monitor this going forward.
But there is, if you read between the lines, and maybe I'm overreading, that a lot of other things have to be done if you're going to stop corruption. After all, demonetization was meant to stop corruption. And obviously on its own, it's a one-off thing. It's not going to, you're still going to have inspectors. You start, and I advise you not to, that's why I've never done, start a restaurant in Delhi or India, anywhere, 16 times a month you have to pay a bribe. That's not going to go away. If you don't change the tax rates, people are going to evade. Unless you have a better, you do talk a lot about the over-enthusiastic, I think you use worse words than that, tax authorities, overzealous. I was being kind.
Yeah, okay. No, but on that, Prannoy, I think it's a very good point. In terms of the long-term benefits, how should we think about these, the so-called follow-up actions? See, the way I think about this is the following. Demonetization basically was as much a signal about a regime shift, saying that, in future the cost of illicit activities or not reporting activities,
but
that goes up. However,
Arvind, I want to tell you, the timing was not perfect, because as we speak, 15,000 crores worth of black money is being created in elections. And no party criticizes any other party because they're all doing it. But you and I are not doing it. And you're doing it right before an election. And I have heard that it is the worst election for black money ever. Police vans are being used to take cash. And this is from a very senior government source. So you've got to correct a lot of things.
Yeah, see, but Prannoy, I think that I don't know enough about these things, and hopefully I never will. And,
I thought you were going to stand for a MLA.
But I do think that in all these things, just because we can't do everything doesn't mean we shouldn't do some things, right?
Right.
And so coming back to this, so the costs have been raised, right? It's also not just an attack on the stock, it's also, in a sense, a stick on the future flows. It's basically saying, if you do this, we've shown that we can go after you. However, sticks are only part of the story. You also need carrots. And that's why we say, the follow-up action, reducing, for me, I am obsessed with bringing land and real estate into the GST, because just as election finance is a big source of black money, real estate is. So we need to clean that up.
And half our politicians keep their black money in real estate. Don't answer that.
No.
Don't have to.
Is it just? I was going to say, is it just politicians?
No. They set a very good example.
If you go outside Greater Kailash, you
okay,
see.
let's move on, because there's another very, very big idea which has actually caught imagination on Twitter, on social media. UBI. First, tell us what UBI is for my aunt.
So UBI is Universal Basic Income. It's based on 3 principles, right? The government is going to help based on 1, universality.
No, 1 second.
Everybody
UBI
gets
means everybody gets some money every
month.
I'll
come to that.
Based on the, okay, sorry.
1, everyone gets it. Okay. We'll come to the it.
Okay.
2, unconditional. You don't have to do, show up somewhere, go and show your NREGA card, none of that. You just get it. 3, agency. You get it in the form of cash, not kind. So these are the 3 principles that go behind UBI.
So you get, everybody in this country will get cash put directly into their bank
account. Yeah.
Rich, poor, anything.
Exactly.
But you've got some, you'd like the rich not to avail of it. Avail is a terrible word.
Yeah.
Take it, if possible.
So I think that, you know, I think here I would like, you know, Boban and Abhishek and Sharan to talk about why this UBI, you know, addresses is a good idea.
Can I just, before you say it, use one of your graphs which you've highlighted and pointed out.
Yeah, let's have that.
This is the issue, this is the problem with
current programs
like Manrega or anything. These are, say, the poorest areas of the country. I mean, these are very roughly.
Yeah.
And look at where the least amount of social welfare goes, to those areas.
Exactly the same areas.
The same areas. That's beautiful research.
And this is Boban, Abhishek, Sharan, do you want to speak to this?
I think one of the biggest things about a UBI is that because it goes directly into your account, you don't have that kind of a misallocation, and it's not dependent on the institutional capacity at the ground level, at the district level, or even at the state level. So that's one of the biggest beneficial points about a UBI.
Right. One more thing I wanted to bring up in a graphic which you had pointed out is it's not only these areas, but look at what's happening to India's states. If we move on to the next graphic, you'll see richer states are getting richer and poorer states are not growing as fast. So the divergence, the inequality is getting even worse. And hopefully the UBI to some extent will tackle that also. Look at that. Bihar, UP, MP, these are the poorer states, and their growth rate on the left is at the lowest. The richest.
This is between 2004 and 2014,
yes,
over
yes,
a 10-year period.
Over a period, yeah.
Do you know what's really interesting about this?
Right.
And this is something that I know, Navneeraj and Gayatri can speak to this as well, that if you contrast this with what's happening across the world,
yes,
poorer countries are actually growing faster than richer countries.
Right.
Within China, and the provinces, the richer provinces, the poorer provinces,
growing faster.
But in India, for some reason,
the other way around. And this is a very serious issue. Like Kerala, Punjab, we look at that graphic again. Slightly richer, Gujarat, the richer states are growing faster.
Yeah.
So the divergence, the inequality is increasing.
Across states in
across
India.
States.
Navneeraj, you want to say something?
Yeah, one clarification, it's per capita, like per person inequality in a way. And second is that in the chapter we show that on the health indicators, we see the reverse trend, that we see that there is convergence, that poorer states or states which are doing poorly in the health indicators like IMR, life expectancy and all, there we see convergence, but it's in the per capita GDP where we see the reverse trend.
This is amazingly good research. It's revealing, because then you think, people don't want to go to poor areas, doctors don't want to go to poor areas, you don't want to go, you go where it's a little more comfortable. I mean, the delivery where it is got conditions, like UBI has no conditions. That's the beauty.
Yeah, that's the beauty. And as Boban was saying, that, it is intrinsic to our programs that those states that are better off will be able to use those, and it's precisely those states, because they're better off in terms of institutional capacity, they'll have fewer poorer people. So the risks of not reaching your target audience are significantly high in current government programs. With UBI, you send it to everyone from on top, check to your bank, show me your Aadhaar number.
And the beauty of it, the amount won't mean that much to a rich person. He may even forego it, like a lot have done in the kerosene subsidy. But it means a lot, and you don't have to prove it. You don't have to pay a bribe to get it. All that.
But see, lest
will it happen?
Yeah. So will it happen? A very good question. So I think that what it depends on is one big political economy question, right? My colleagues have costed this at about between 4 and 5% of GDP.
Yes.
So if you add it on to an existing programs, there's no way we can afford it.
Yeah.
So
it's got to substitute.
Yeah, it's got to substitute for existing ones. And then the question is there an appetite to, a political appetite to reduce, because one of the iron...
You said one terrible thing today, that what you need for UBI is that the states and the center have to agree. And I thought, well, there goes UBI.
Wrong. Prannoy, wrong. Let me push back. I think that one of the most, elevating, uplifting things that I have been a part of in the last 2-3 months is to sit in on the GST Council meetings, where the centre and the states get together and hammer out all their differences. If you can do it on matters such as the GST, why can't you do it on UBI? So the institutions of cooperative federalism are actually improving, and the GST Council, under the leadership of the Finance Minister, has really shown that.
Well, may Godspeed be with you and your words. And I won't take a poll because I may not agree with you. But anyway, we hope it happens.
But we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves.
But it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, but we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves, because all we say in the survey is that it's an idea that's not necessarily ripe for implementation, because all these challenges.
It's a great idea. Just do it.
Just Nike.
Right,
But I think at least we should discuss this more seriously.
Now, we've been talking about the divergence, but let's have a look at the other aspect of India, the One India aspect that you talk about.
Yeah.
And what's interesting in the One India aspect is new data that's coming out, that we are quite an integrated economy, much more so than we thought.
Much more so than we thought.
Yeah, it's like a huge surprise. Look at this graphic, for example. One India, up to now, previous estimates, they're based on the census, thought that trade and migration was about 4 million people that move around the country every year, on average. 4 million people move from different states. But now the Economic Survey estimates it's 9 million. Yeah. Now that's a lot. That is more than double the earlier estimate. It changes your perspective of India as a one economy. Counter to that, if we look at the next graphic, it kind of talks about how much internal, there's still a lot of potential. That's one way of saying we've got a long way to go. What's internal trade as a percentage of GDP? Now in Brazil it's 76%. In China it's close to that. I think it's about 74%. But look at India, 54%. That's 20% is a huge difference between us and China. And Indonesia, I don't understand why. Maybe it's a small country and it does more export. But do you look at that as a lot of potential, or do you look at that 54 is not bad?
The economist turned to his wife and said, "Honey, do you love me?" And she said, "Relative to what?" So it's a little bit like that here, because I think this actually underestimates how integrated we are actually. To be honest with you, when we started doing this, and please speak up, my impression was that, and remember, economists, they caricature us. They show these trucks, by the way, which we also show, if we can open the page, we show these trucks standing at the border, idling away, barrier-riddled India, right? But actually these numbers are very high compared to that. You haven't put up Canada, for example, or the European Union. Yeah. India does much better. Right. So the notion that, we have very little internal integration is one of the, I think, the big contributions of this survey, that's a myth that we have exploded in this survey.
The only thing with this having a lot of potential is, like my golf, I've had a lot of potential in golf for 50 years. Yeah. Not yet achieved.
My friend, look at this migration. We're actually moving. Can you want to speak to the migration numbers?
Yeah. So one thing again, census estimates only go up to 2011, and this is using railways data, and these numbers go up to 2016.
Use railways data.
Yeah, but I want to say one thing on this. Very important. I would claim with some immodesty, the first survey to embrace big data. Okay, yes. There are three examples. Yes. 3 examples of big data. This is one of them. Guess what the data we got? And I really want to thank Minister Suresh Prabhu and Hanish Yadav and Chris for giving this to us. You know what this is? Every train journey between every destination, every origin for the last 6 years. So there are like 10,000 stations in India. Every pair, every month, unreserved passengers. Yes. They provided us the
unreserved
data.
Is a lovely idea because they're the migrant
exactly.
labor. Yeah, very nice.